Welcome to another episode of the No Ceilings podcast. I am Tyler Metcalf, back from vacation, which was much needed. Thank you, Rucker and Nathan, for filling in on Tuesday. For tonight's episode, off to a hot start. Rucker is not here with me as he usually is, as he is boots on the ground in Vegas for the Pac-12 tournament with Albert. But we have two new additions to the No Ceilings family, Stephen Gillaspie and Maxwell Baumbach. So it being their debut week, it felt appropriate to bring them on and kind of talk through some guys who, unfortunately, we may be seeing the last of in the college basketball world. But Maxwell, how's it going?
It's going great. I'm really excited to be on as a longtime listener to this show. Well, as long as it's been around. So I guess 4 months. That counts as a long time in terms of the life cycle of the show. But nevertheless, I'm super glad to be on board, and I'm really excited to talk about these prospects with you because I think that there's a pretty wide range of variance on these guys still. And that's interesting considering that we might not get any larger of a sample in a lot of these scenarios. So I'm fired up for this one.
Steven, welcome back. How are you doing?
Oh, hey man, it's glad to be back. Second time, stint on the show, and happy to be here with you. And Maxwell is a familiar face. Folks might know that we've done a little bit of work together, so it's pretty cool, man. I'm excited to be part of the No Ceilings team. I've been a since day one, pretty much, and I'm excited to get going on today's show.
Yeah, well, I know myself and everyone else was extremely excited to have you guys part of the team, but might as well just dive into these guys because we have a healthy list to go through today. And these are guys who, like I mentioned, we maybe not see any more of in the college basketball world. And part of that is, it is. Some we may see sneak into the tournament based on how other tournaments go. But the team that I kind of wanted to start out with is North Carolina State, and they're pretty much only two draftable prospects this year. But the most exciting, at least for me, is Terquavion Smith, freshman guard, 6'4", 160. He's currently averaging 16.3 points, 4.1 rebounds, 2.1 assists, 1.3 steals, and 39.8, 36.9, and 69.8 shooting splits. Smith is one of these freshmen who could be one of the likely or unlikely one and done prospects this year, and has really exploded onto the scene with his explosive scoring outbursts. Stephen, where are you at with Smith?
I have him kind of in like this middle of the second round, might even see him creep up a little bit on my board. It's weird that we're in this part of the season. I'm sure you guys will agree where these guys are going to be out of our sight. So we have to do our due diligence to make sure that we can go back and watch these guys. I talked about that with Rucker before, is that, how do we make sure that we're adequately assessing guys and we don't fall victim to recency bias and just be like, okay, well, these guys are in front of our faces more often. Let's move them up on the board. And the last memory that we're going to have for Terquavion Smith is not necessarily the best one either. So keeping that in mind, we don't want to, I hate this expression because I'm a father of four, but I can't think of a better one. You don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater type thing. You know what I mean? So you don't want to just watch this last game. And we know that NBA front offices are going to look at this and be like, oh, this is a conference tournament. And he just kind of was a no-show, but we got to remember how young this dude is, how inexperienced he is, how much this wasn't really supposed to be the season where he's supposed to break out. So he's a little bit ahead of schedule, in my opinion, and he's just a lethal shooter. I love that. He's 6'4". He's got a frame that looks like it can support a little bit more functional muscle, and I think that he'll add that. I don't know if he stays with North Carolina State. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. I think he should test and just get feedback from front offices moving forward. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with him, Tyler.
Maxwell, did you have any expectations with Smith entering the season, or what did he do?
No.
If not, what did he do to really kind of jump on your radar?
I mean, he scored a lot of points. To be honest, Seabron was the first guy that kind of popped up on that North Carolina State team. So when he started to really gain a lot of momentum, and it's easy to forget, like the draft cycle is so up and down throughout the season that there was a point where a lot of people were talking about Seabron as an end of the first round guy. And I don't think you hear like a peep of that anymore. So when I first started turning into North Carolina State, it was primarily focused on Dereon Seabron. Smith stood out to me a little bit early on, but it wasn't until he really started to have those big scoring performances later in the year that he really kind of captured my attention. I think the hard part, like the tricky place that he's going to find himself in, and I agree with Stephen 100%. I think he should test 1000%. But watching that game, I really kind of wanted him to go back to school, and I'll kind of touch on why real quick here. So he's 6'4", and I believe he's like 165.
Yeah,
roughly.
It's
his listed weight right now. And there's games where he'll do like real combo guard stuff, and he'll be passing the ball while he'll be seeing the court. And at the start of that game, was it yesterday or 2 days ago?
Yesterday, right?
Yesterday, yeah. He threw like one of the worst passes at the start of the game I've seen this whole draft cycle, where it was at the top of the key and it was just like a slow chest pass. And you could tell like the defender was 1000% going to pick it off. Even if you'd whip that thing, it was going to get picked. And he's a great athlete, and he can shoot the cover off the ball. And between that, and I think the fact that he can gain size, to me, like if he goes back to school and just takes time to work on his point guard type skills and things like that, gain a little bit of size, I think he's going to be in a much safer position. Whereas if he goes out right now, it's just an undersized kind of combo guard, basically an undersized 2, whose defense is really just predicated on I'm very fast. That archetype, like there's a million guys like that. Like even this year, there's like Spagnuolo, there's Bassan, there's all these guys that are like 6'3" to 6'4" and can fill it up. And I just think that he has so much more potential than a lot of those guys. So I just want him to go back to school to actualize it a little bit more, so he doesn't end up in like the Tyrell Terry situation where he goes to a team that's trying to be competitive and he's not sticking right away. And now he's in developmental no man's land and nobody really has a stake in making him improve. So that's where I'm at with him as of now.
Yeah, and the tools I feel like are pretty obvious. For me, it's the consistency and slowing the game down mentally, where you see a lot of mistakes that really young players make all the time. I get a lot of Anthony Simons vibes from him, and Simons has developed into a really, really good player, but that was a lot of commitment by the Trailblazers, and we rarely see teams invest that much time and resources into really slowly developing these guys, because Simons was this bouncy athlete who had a lot of shooting potential, but his body wasn't NBA ready. And Smith's, I think he's way off from being NBA ready physically. And then when it feels like he sped up mentally a lot, where you guys talked about the passing mistakes, the inconsistencies there. Sometimes the playmaking flashes are like, holy shit, where did that come from? Mm-hmm. And then, like you said, it's this pass, like, holy shit, where did that come from? And then the shot selection is the same thing. So it feels like he's rushed a lot. Stephen, is there anything that when you go back and kind of relook at some of his games between now and the draft, is there anything that you're really going to try and keep an eye out for that could potentially sway your opinion of him one way or the other?
Yeah, I think it's his ability, or at least willingness to attack the basket. And I think, one thing that we all can agree on, right, is that the physical nature of the next level, especially for guards, right? Like everyone loves Ja Morant, rightfully so. He's one of the most explosive players in the NBA. Terquavion Smith is pretty athletic in his own right. Like, I'm not saying he's the 1% or the 1% or anything like that, but what makes the special guy special is their ability to finish through contact. Right now, we're not going to see that from Terquavion Smith, but if he continues to add that functional muscle, that will affect that field goal percentage that almost mirrors his 3-point percentage, just because that's the majority of his shot diet, right? Like he can't really get to the basket whenever he wants. Like he has to look for certain opportunities. He has to find these certain windows and angles to attack the basket. What I want to go back and look at in particular is how much of his drives are opportunities that the other team are kind of just giving him, as opposed to him maybe inserting his will. And I think, adding that muscle mass could help him be a little bit more assertive and aggressive and round out his shot diet.
Yeah, he is just not a threat when he's chased off the line. Like he has a bit of a runner game, but on synergy, he's in the 7th percentile on shots around the basket.
Yep.
So like, yeah, he's a great 3-point shooter, but if he needs to attack a closeout and teams are just running him off that line, I just don't. If the playmaking chops were like a little better, I could talk myself into it, but yeah, it's just like Tyler said, it's just going to take a team that's willing to be super, super patient if it's going to work out for him if he goes this year.
Well, someone who does not struggle around the rim is his teammate, Dereon Seabron, who 6'7", 180 wing guard, I guess, currently averaging 17.3 points per game, up from 5.2 last year. 8.2 rebounds, 3.2 assists, 49% from the field, 25.5% from three, and 71% from the line. Maxwell, I want to start with you. Where are you at with Seabron?
I am in a complicated place with Seabron as well, because I earlier in the season I was a lot more into him, and I think it was just seeing like the jumper not really progress at all. And the other thing that started to eat at me with him is I feel like if you're going to be that type of player, there's like inconsistencies that I feel like should not exist. Like, I don't know how many total blocked shots he had this season, but I don't think it's like more than 5, if I'm not mistaken. Like,
so shots,
like,
you're saying that he blocked, not that were blocked front, like his shot
like
attempt
shots
being
that
blocked.
he blocked.
Okay.
Like
he had 4 blocks this year.
4 blocks. Yeah. So like he's 6'7", and like you see him in transition, like run and jump, and it's like awesome. And he has this awesome feel for the game on offense and everything like that. And then there's just not all that much there on the defensive end. And I feel like if you're going to be a non-shooter, I need that defense to be there, at least out of the gate. I do love that he rebounds so well because his transition game is so good. Like, that is going to translate. And I love his feel for the game. If the defense is the other thing that, like, the shot's the big one. If he could shoot, I'd feel fine about it, but I wish there was more defense there is my kind of main concern with him. There's no reason based on his physicality and feel for the game that he shouldn't get a few like help side blocks throughout the course of the season. There should be more than 4 of them based on his tools and savvy.
Stephen, where are you with Seabron? Because like you guys mentioned earlier, he was getting first round buzz about mid of the season, and he kind of just fell off the face of the earth because I think people realized what his game was and then didn't see it change a whole lot. So is that kind of where you're at with him?
Yeah, well, I mean, Metcalf, if you remember when we did our, drafting a college team to win tomorrow, I took Seabron in that draft, and we forgot all about Jay Ivey. That was a fun episode. But I loved him early on in the season, and we were both describing him, his ability to just kind of almost parallel the floor. Like he will attack and like bend his body and contort himself. He has good, excellent, I think his core strength is top notch, right? Like he can do so much either, with the ball in his hand on a live dribble, or when he's up in the air and can kind of contort himself and use his body to shield the defender away and get up a shot. I agree a lot with what Maxwell is saying. And here's the thing, when I look at a guy who right now at best, I think could be a 2nd round talent, you're not going to be given the ball, right? So what can you do to help the team? And right now, Seabron is very much so like I need the ball type of player. He's not the best defender either. And we're talking about how slight of frame Terquavion Smith is. Like, Dereon Seabron is good at attacking the basket, right? But as a defender, I don't know if being 6'7" and a $180 is really going to hold up very well at the next level on the perimeter, right? So if we got a guy who I don't think is going to be very, skillful without the ball in his hands, and I don't think is going to be a top-notch defender at his size and his position, I don't necessarily know how teams are going to be looking at him and being like, oh, we need Dereon Seabron. Now, if it's a bad team and they got time to wait, he could develop into a very unique player, because I think at his size and his skill set, he can be a little bit stronger and improve on that jump shot and the defense, and the sky's the limit for like him being kind of like a weapon X on his team.
Yeah, when we talk about the pluses with him, I think the rim pressure is the obvious one. That's the one that jumps off the
Mhm.
screen at you when you
Mhm.
watch him. And the way he turns the corners on his defenders almost kind of mirrors those like old screenshots we would get of Von Miller with the Denver Broncos and the 45-degree angle that he would bend at getting around the offensive line. So like that balance, that flexibility is so impressive. But then you look at the shot, and I mean, 17th percentile on all jump shots, 31st percentile shooting off the catch, 12th percentile shooting off the dribble. It's just not good enough. And it's not even on high volume, where I mean, he only took 1.3 3-point attempts per game this season. So it's pretty obvious that he doesn't trust his shot. He knows he's not a good shooter. And as the season progressed, I really think that we saw defenses realize that too, and just kind of stop caring about it. And if your ability to really pressure the rim completely goes away if those defenders aren't respecting you on the perimeter. So Maxwell, is there anything? It kind of sounds like we all think he should return for another year and hone that shot. If he does return for another year, is there anything besides just being a better shooter that he could do offensively to kind of take that next leap?
Maybe I think to Steven's point too, maybe even just like putting on some size might not be the worst thing. Cause I think, like we mentioned, like you have to be so good to have the ball on an NBA team that even if he can get enough bulk that maybe teams could talk themselves into like him as a short roll passer and say like, oh, maybe we can have this guy run screens. And then if we're blitz, we dump it to him and things like that. Like that could be a potential NBA role that is low maintenance, but allows him to have the ball a decent amount if need be, things like that. I think even just like his dribble craft, because to your point, it did seem like early in the season, he was getting to the rim a lot easier. Like I have all these notes from earlier in the year about how like he has no problem getting to his spots and things like that. And then like more recent games, it's not as easy for him just because teams know to load up and, you know, where to force him. But I think the shooting, I think adding size and maybe even focusing on, like short roll passing, things like that. Just little ways to clean up his game and then add a little bit more dribble craft. But the shot is the big thing. The shot would make everything else a lot easier for him. If he can just find a way to play off the ball more consistently, that's the key.
So let's just hypothetically say Seabron stays in the draft. He ends up going in the second round. Stephen, what's the idealized version of him? If he reaches not the absolute outcome, because, you know, that for most players, that's an all-star, but, you know, just a likely outcome. What do you think that player looks like?
I mean, I think the best version of Seabron as a rookie in the NBA, if he's contributing to a team in the second round, he's going to have to be something that we haven't really seen very much at North Carolina State. And he's got to be a good cutter and good slasher, right? Like he's got the body, he's got the athleticism, right? Like he can get up vertically, right? So I think, you know, offensively learning how to move well without the ball, you know, North Carolina State, forgive me for forgetting the young man's name, but their starting center, who was actually supposed to be pretty good this year, you know, that they missed him. So
Manny Bates, I believe, was that?
Yeah, I believe
Okay.
you're right. Right. So they were without him, and he's supposed to be pretty significant, you know, for that team. So playing alongside a big, especially one where in the NBA, it's pretty possible that he can play off of a big who's a good decision maker, right? You know, being a good cutter, good slasher, being excellent without the ball in your hand, and he's got to like sell out like completely on just being a pest on the defensive end. You know, however that looks like. He's got to be a slasher and a defender and keep working on that 3-point shot, because that's really what I want to see from him if he's going to be in the NBA this year.
Well, I think someone that we may all agree on that also needs to improve their defense is Bryce McGowens, freshman wing from Nebraska, 6'7", 179, averaged 16.8 points, 5.2 rebounds, 1.4 assists, 40% from the floor, 27% from the three, and 83% from the line. McGowens is so frustrating for me. He had an awesome end to the season. Beginning of the season, I thought was some of the worst basketball I've seen. And as the season progressed, he improved a lot, I thought. The outside shooting never really came around. Like I think or at least like I thought and hoped it would, but his shot selection slowly improved. And that's where we saw his scoring efficiency improve because he started attacking the rim more. Maxwell, where are you at with McGowens? Do you think it's likely that he stays in the draft, or do you think he would be better served returning for another?
Yeah, so right now with McGowens, I think he should go, but I think a lot of that's going to have to depend on what kind of feedback he gets. To me right now, I think he could easily go end of the first. I've got him right around that range, right around 30, I want to say. I think a little higher than that after I just adjusted. I'm a believer in the shot. I think that the outside shot's going to get there. And a lot of people are just like, oh, free throw percentage or whatever. Like, yeah, his free throw percentage is good. But to me, I think just his overall touch in the mid-range is really beautiful. And I think that his ability to separate got a lot better as the season went along. I didn't love him as a separator early on in the year. And I think just his offensive footwork came a long way. But as you mentioned off the top, the defense can be ugly, and it really eats me up when it's bad on the ball too. Because it's like if a guy falls asleep off the ball, it's like you're a high usage player on offense. I can forgive that a little bit, overlook it, but it's like just have some pride. Like just do not let the guy that's right in front of you just eat your lunch. So that's been frustrating for me. But I think McGowan should go. I think a team is going to see a 6'7" guy that has potential to shoot the three, gets to the line like a madman, and as Nekias Duncan just wrote, drawing fouls is a skill. You don't have to like it, but it's a skill. I think he's a real NBA scorer. I think that everything is there on that end. The defense, it's a problem, and it's something he's got to work out. But I'm in on McGowens. I've got him like a late first-round grade on him right now. And I also think that there's some Josh Christopher to the situation where, like, last year he had a really low assist total, but he played with Alonzo Verge, and Bryce McGowens is also playing with Alonzo Verge. And I think that some guys may feel like they have to get theirs on a team with Alonzo Verge on it. So I'll leave it at that.
Very artfully done.
But that's none of my business.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So McGowens has been a little polarizing among the no ceilings group this season. Nathan Grubel has been pretty high on him all season long.
Beating that drum all year. Love it.
The rest of us,
Nathan.
I've been a little more hesitant, back and forth. Others have been pretty much completely out. Stephen, where have you been with McGowens? How has your view of him kind of progressed through the season?
It's waxed and waned, dude. Like early on in the year, I believe in my 1.0, I had him as a late first. I think I've seen him fall all the way down to like 43-ish on one of my recent boards. But now I have him back as a late first rounder. And I think it speaks to what we wanted to see from him early on and what we're actually seeing from him now. Looking a little bit through some of the inefficiencies, I think that's where Nathan was right. He saw like, look, this is like a true blue freshman who is asked to do a lot on a poor team in a very competitive conference, right? Like it's very easy to forget about Bryce McGowens in the conference that he plays in, right? So I think, his stick-to-itiveness, if that's a thing, as far as understanding his role, understanding that it's not going to be pretty every night, but that's what the team is asking him to do, so he's going to do it. Again, he's another one of these guys that seems to be kind of the theme tonight is he's got the frame. He's a little light in the pants. And he's not leaving the best impression based off of his last game, right? So it's very interesting that that's been the common theme. But I don't know. Like, I wasn't around, like, as far as scouting games in 2009 when DeMar DeRozan was drafted. But I think I remember at least a little bit of the same concerns about DeMar DeRozan coming out of the draft, applying to Bryce McGowens. And if you consider the fact that, like, he's good at attacking the basket. He draws fouls. He's got good touch, for mid-range. His three-point shot isn't there. He's a little undersized, and he's not a good defender. That sounds like young DeMar DeRozan to me. And look at what he's doing now. I think a team could easily parallel the professional trajectory of both of those players. I'm not saying that he will, right? But there's a lot of similarities between those two players, and he's the go-to guy on his team, and he more times than not he delivers. And I think that I'm starting to fall back into the understanding of, yeah, Bryce McGowens is a first round talent in this draft because of, the improving in season is a big thing for me as a talent evaluator. Like, if you recognize that, like, these are my weaknesses and I can improve them in season, like, that's really difficult to do. He's a worker. I don't bet against workers. And that's where I'm kind of at with McGowens.
Yeah, my biggest frustration with McGowens earlier, like I said, was the shot selection, and he would just way too eager to chuck from anywhere. And
yeah,
that it's still there later in the season, but it definitely improved, and his determination and intentionality of attacking the rim got a lot better. And that's where we saw more of that kind of sneaky vertical pop and that touch in the mid-range. But what worries me is how little kind of off-ball movement we saw from him. When he ran, and he only ran off screens 5.3% of the time and was in the 33rd percentile scoring in those situations. A lot of that stems from the shooting struggles we kind of talked about earlier. I think most of us think that will improve long-term, especially as he
the
gets
shot
stronger.
looks, the mechanics, and I know that you like to say this all the time, Mecca. Like, I'm not a shot doctor, but I play one today on TV, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think that the shot looks fine. Like, it does. There's nothing like fundamentally glaring about his shot. I think that can improve over time, and it might take as long as it took DeMar DeRozan in San Antonio, right? Like, eventually it got there.
So, Maxwell, since you mentioned earlier, it's really hard to get the ball in the NBA. You have to be so good. The threshold is so extremely high. So if McGowens if the shot isn't falling early and it's taking some time and he's not physically ready to kind of be that dominant ball handler, what is he early in his career?
That's a great question. He might not be in the league for long. And people don't like to say that, but it's true. Like, everyone is always like, this guy's floor is a rotation player. It's like, most guys' floor is out of the league. It's really hard to stay in the NBA. And like, there's nothing wrong with that. And I think when we say that, a lot of times people will be like, oh, like, you hate this player, like, you want them to fail, or you're being too pessimistic. And it's like, no, like, it's just, you have to be phenomenal to play in the NBA. I think it could get really dicey for him. But to be honest, I just think the scoring package is almost too good for that to happen. And maybe I'm being naive because there are a lot of guys that score a lot of points in college that don't pan out in the NBA. But I think he's going to have a few buffers. I think one of them is going to be his size. I think if he decides to commit on defense, just the fact that he's bigger is going to give him more leash than a lot of other players. I think that when he gets into an NBA weight room, his finishing is going to get better too. So I just really buy the scoring enough. But if the shot isn't falling, I think he's going to have a really hard time. And I think it wouldn't shock me if he ends up being a quote unquote second draft type of player. If he, really has a hard time out of the gate, doesn't get minutes, is kind of bouncing around, doesn't get an option picked up or things like that. I do think he's going to figure it out, but it wouldn't shock me if it takes him longer than some other guys, just because scoring in the NBA is obscenely difficult. And if that's your thing, you've got to be really good at it.
Well, I gave you the pessimistic view, and Stephen, I'll send the optimistic view over to you. You've mentioned DeMar DeRozan a couple times. If McGowens really does improve his body, I think he has the frame for it. I think he can easily put on a good amount of muscle, and the outside shot improves, but not 40% improves, but like mid-30s. Is DeRozan, do you think, his peak outcome? Do you think better, worse? Where are you at with kind of like his best outcome?
I mean, probably like a DeMar DeRozan light, probably somewhere between like an Evan Turner and DeMar DeRozan is what I could probably see the best outcome for McGowens being, right? But, part of no ceilings, you don't like to think about like this is only good as you can get. And it's really weird, right? Like, player comps, you're only talking about seeing shades of, because each player really is pretty unique, because we tried to do it all year long, right? Like, this guy is this guy. Well, no, he's not because of this, right? So I think probably somewhere between an Evan Turner and a DeMar DeRozan as far as productivity, shot diet, what's asked of them on a night-to-night basis. I think that somewhere in that window is what I would expect.
Well, I don't have a smooth transition for this one, but this is a guy who I shoehorned into this conversation because I irrationally love him. Taran Armstrong, 6'5"
Yeah.
point guard, 85 pounds from Cal Baptist. I absolutely adore him. I don't think he probably goes out, but I think he's pretty easily the best playmaker in this class, and some of the passing angles and his passing vision and accuracy and variety are absolutely absurd, especially for a freshman. Maxwell, when I threw his name out, you got a little excited. Where are you at with Armstrong?
Yeah, to me, he's a returner, but he's one of my favorite returners. Like when you mentioned him, I was like, all right, I'm watching a Cal Baptist game ASAP. Like I was so excited to just like have the excuse to do it again. The man's a wizard with the ball. Like there's just so few guys that have that special passing talent. And all of the guys I missed on in the last draft cycle were high feel players. Like I was lower on Jeremiah Robinson Earl than I should have been, lower on Delano Bant than I should have been, lower on Trendon Watford than I should have been. And I still had Watford higher than other people did. Like those are the guys I missed on. Like I think in this day and age, if you have that type of high feel and you have a decent amount of size, you can stick. Obviously the outside shot's got to get a little bit better. And he's not so big that, you know what I mean? That it's like a guaranteed thing, but he's not small either. And I think that the length and size is going to go a long way to help him out on defense in the long run. One thing I kind of want to throw back to you real quick.
Yeah.
So I'm big on the transfer portal. I think a lot of guys will benefit from being able to transfer. And like, I hate this because I love the mid-majors, but there's so many mid-major guys where I'm like, I'd love to just see you at a bigger school for a year. How would you feel if instead of transferring up, if he went to the NBL and did Next Stars for a year?
I wouldn't hate it.
Do you think that's too dangerous? Because then if it doesn't pan out, is he just like stuck there forever?
Well, I mean, he's from there, so I don't think that would necessarily be worst case scenario.
Yeah. Oh no, not at all.
And it's tough because I think, and the level of competition argument always comes into play, especially at a school like Cal Baptist. When you watch his playmaking, I think that argument pretty much goes out the window because the passes he's making are, I think, competition proof.
He did that against like schools like Texas too. Like in games against big schools, he had phenomenal passing games. So
right, and people will go up or go look up his stats, and the assist numbers aren't like shocking, but assist is a 2-person stat. You have to have someone make the shot, and Cal Baptist
that's where assist percentage comes in.
Exactly. So I wouldn't hate it if he went to the NBL. I think it would kind of show that he can do this against adults and more physical players and higher level athletes on a more consistent basis. I would be kind of surprised since his brother's on the team as well. So I kind of feel like they're a package deal. Those things kind of seem to work out that way. But it's just such a bummer that the scoring hasn't come along. He's had a handful of 20-point games, but he's in the 19th percentile in overall points per game. And if that scoring never improves, I struggle to see an NBA team taking a shot on him. So Stephen, I think we all agree that he likely comes back. Even though I think the feel and the playmaking are really special, but what would you need to see from Armstrong to really make it, or to make it viable that he makes that jump?
He needs something else on offense that he can do at a consistent level, right? And with it being Cal Baptist and he being like the heliocentric player on his team, right? Everything is going to go through him. He's the hub on that team. But what's going to happen at the next level is that, sure, he can make crazy passes, but what else can you do? Like NBA teams are going to be real quick to figure him out. And even Giddey, right? Like I think that we underestimated how high at his position is such a benefit to his, production. But two, just he's such a creative, finisher around the basket, even though that he's not necessarily the strongest guy. He understands angles and body positioning, things of that nature. I don't think that Taran Armstrong is there, and he's 6'5", which is pretty significant, right? Because in a lot of coaches' heads, that means that you can play either backcourt position, right? So he's not an explosive athlete or anything like that, but he plays the game with tremendous feel, like as Maxwell has been saying. I would just love it if he could be some sort of a threat as a scorer, right? And how much of that is the fact that he's playing alongside other teammates at Cal Baptist, or how much of it is that he's just a great passer and that's essentially it, right? Like, I think that if there was anything else to his game, like maybe Cal Baptist wouldn't have been the only, option for him, So there's a lot of things to consider. I love the fact that he already has an elite skill in playmaking, but he's got a couple of that with something. It's hard to make it with passing really being the only thing that you're a threat to do.
So this may be kind of like a silly observation to make, but does the fact that his brother is like a really prolific 3-point shooter help you buy the shot at all? Like, even like, not even just from like they're brothers, so he'll also be good. Like, but like the fact that it's like maybe his brother takes a ton of threes and hits them like 37% or something along those lines. So like, it can't hurt to have somebody around that, figured out how to shoot. Like, I don't think he's gonna shoot this poorly again next season. I do anticipate the jump in scoring. I think it's just always going to be hard when you're at a Cal Baptist to kind of capture everybody's attention. And like, I think the success of players like Giddey and LaMelo in the NBL as high field players, even like, granted, he's not playing that well until recently, but like a guy like Ousmane Dieng, where it's like, he's putting up really inefficient shooting percentages, but he's still playing a lot for the Breakers because he is pretty high feel and can move the ball when need be. And granted, he's 6'10", but just having that ability to just like move the ball and make good decisions can really go a long way in that league. And like, I don't know if that's on the table. I know his brother's a Cal Baptist, but the more I think about it, the more I feel like that might be the move for him.
I think it's a good call, to maybe go to the NBL. But again, every concern that I had with Giddey, I think the height covers a lot of mistakes, right? Like it's makeup on a pig, it's lipstick on a pig. You know what I mean? It looks a little bit better. 6'5" though, again, is not earth-shattering point guard size, and I think that's kind of where I'm at. That might be a lazy take, but the 3-point shooting has to come around. Like, something else on the offensive end has to be there. And maybe you're right. Maybe the 3-point shot does improve. But what do we see with all those other guys competing in the NBL is like their percentages weren't necessarily sexy when they were in that league either. So it's kind of like danged if you do, almost, in my opinion.
Yeah, true.
Well, I think that's enough Taran Armstrong, despite my ability to talk about him all day. I know.
What's the biggest thing you want to see from him, just real quick?
Yeah, what's the high-end outcome, Mr. Metcalf, of Taran Armstrong? If he's drafted in the second round, a team takes a chance on him, and he's succeeding in the NBA, what's that look like?
Ricky Rubio. When Ricky was younger, I think he was a better defender than Taran, because I think he was a little quicker. But I generally like Armstrong's defensive footwork. I think he's a decent off-ball defender, but he's not very quick twitchy. I believe that's a word or term, at least. So they'll get exposed some. Offensively, I think he has decent touch around the rim. He's in the 59th percentile on runners, 59th percentile around the basket and on post-ups. So I think there's a little there to work with. I think that footwork that we see on defense also translates to offense and his ability to get to the rim. And I think he's a really, really good ball handler, which kind of shows up in him being in the 84th percentile in isolation scoring. It's just a shot. And against NBA level defenders and athletes, that's where that kind of stuff goes away, because he doesn't quite have the craft to really compensate for the lack of explosiveness or twitchiness. So I think a little more flexibility in that realm. Obviously, the shot improving would do wonders. But there aren't a ton of indicators there that are like, oh yeah, it's going to take a jump, like there are with McGowens. And we all think that McGowens will eventually make that jump. I think the indicators for Armstrong are a little fuzzier. So defensively, I think he's fine. The playmaking, I think, is in a tier of itself in college this year. And then it's just that shot. And if that can really come around, and if he can get a little twitchier or a little more flexible in his on-ball creation, that alone, I think, would do wonders for him.
Yeah, I mean, I hope we see it. And I've been like you, man. Like I've had draftable grades on him up until like pretty much yesterday. But I mean, again, that can change. My opinions on players have changed all season long. But I've wanted Taran Armstrong to be a thing in this draft, just like you, man.
Well, I'm holding firm that he will be a thing eventually in the NBA, because that field, that playmaking, it's too hard to pass up.
Here's to the NBL, Maxwell.
Yeah.
Another guy who I think has extremely high feel is Harrison Ingram, who is 6'8", 230-pound forward from Stanford, 10.4 points, 6.7 rebounds, 3 assists. Ingram is one of those guys that I've really struggled with, because I know a lot of draft Twitter especially loves him and has him as a top 20 guy. I can't get around to that. The production just isn't there for me. But I get the feel. I see the instincts, the understanding of how to play, and that's typically huge for me. So, Maxwell, where are you at with Ingram? Have you had as much trouble kind of pinning him down?
He's like one of probably, like, if I were to name like my top 3 hardest guys to evaluate, he's unquestionably in that group for me. And like I just mentioned earlier, all the guys I missed on last year were guys who were like 6'8" and above, high field players. So I watch Ingram and I'm like, I don't see it. Then I'm like, that's everybody I was wrong about last year. So it's been really hard for me to try and suss his game out. And I don't think Stanford is like an ideal situation, but I don't think it's terrible either. Like, I don't know. You watch some of their games and like Angel's another guy with some size who can shoot a little bit. Like, he's got decent teammates. Like, I feel like I try to make excuses for him at times when like he's 6'8" and he's got a bunch of size and he's horrible finishing around the basket. Like, there's just some real scoring issues. And I think that's all stuff that can be worked out in time. So I really like, he's got the keys to the offense at Stanford. So for me personally, I want to just see him go back and just work on that scoring a little bit, because everything else is there. The feel is there. I think he kind of played himself into shape. I had some real concerns about the foot speed early in the season, and I think that got a lot better as the year went along. But I just really worry about his ability to put the ball in the basket. And it's not even just as an off-ball shooter. It's everywhere on the floor. Like, you should not have such bad at-the-rim numbers as a 6'8" dude with his size and strength.
So, Stephen, I'm the general manager. I haven't seen a second of Ingram play, so I have no idea what he is as a player. All I'm seeing is okay box score numbers. I'm seeing him in the 30th percentile in overall points per possession, and 31st percentile on all jump shots, and 26th percentile in points per possession around the rim and non-post-up situations. And you're coming to me to convince me to draft Harrison Ingram. Give me the elevator pitch on him. Why should I?
Well, first off, congratulations on the new job.
Thank you.
Secondly, where am I drafting him? Am I just telling you that he's a top 58 player this year?
Back end of the first.
Back end of the first. Okay. So here's the thing.
25 to 30.
Okay. I can do that because that's where I've had him living for a little while. So 6'8" forward with a little bit of guard skills, high feel. The height, we have a track record now in the NBA of guys with high feel at his size being able to translate significantly well, if not better than the expectations coming in, right? So we understand that he is going to make the correct reads. He's a trustworthy player. You're going to be able to put him on the floor, and he's going to make really good decisions. He's not going to make a mistake on the offensive end. Defensively, his defense is actually a little bit better than being advertised. I don't think that people talk about his defense at all, where I do think that it's not a net negative, has the potential to be a positive on a team, right? He's a guy that you can put at multiple positions. He's very scalable. I think that you can give him minutes depending on the team. You can maybe put him in situations where he's like kind of just an off-ball guy, second side creator. You can put him on the elbow and trust people to run actions around him, and he's going to find the open guy. He's going to rebound tremendously well. He's going to make great reads in transition, and he has the potential for that shot to come around, right? Like, I'm a firm believer in guys where you say, if you add a shot, it takes you to a next level. We already trust him as a decision maker. We trust him as a competitor, as a rebounder. He's playing on a really bad team where he is the hub on that offense. There's really not a lot of other great finishers or shooters around him, and they had a chance to make the tournament this year. Look at the success that Zaire Williams on this very same team had a terrible season, goes into the NBA, and is a tremendous, or I won't say tremendous, is definitely a better prospect than anyone would have ever thought except me. And I think that Harrison Ingram is going to translate very well at the next level with the potential to be up to a 4th to 5th starter on a team.
All right. Role playing over. Thank you. So I kind of sound a little hypocritical here because I just said that I've been struggling to buy into Ingram. But when I think about his game, it kind of reminds me a lot of Jeremy Sohan, who has gotten way more love, especially in the draft community, where there are these big forwards, high feel, can do a bit of everything, and just aren't these prolific shooters. So Maxwell, you kind of raise your eyebrows there. What separates them so much for you?
Yeah. First off, sorry, my daughter's crying in the background, so you may hear her a little bit. But I just want to say the big difference to me, like, one is just overall athleticism and fluidity, and leaping ability, in that Jeremy Sohan is able to leap. No, I'm just kidding. That was really cruel. But I
he's
think
only
Jeremy
slightly
Sohan,
joking.
Yeah. I think Jeremy Sohan, he's just a much better athlete. Like I would never trust Harrison Ingram to be the main rim protector on the floor at any point in time, where I think we've seen Baylor kind of have to use these small ball lineups recently with Suhan at the 5, and they've gotten away with it. I think that's a big part of it. I think I think their feel is very similar. I think Suhan's just worlds ahead of him as a defender right now. That's the big thing to me, just overall defense and athleticism.
Stephen, same boat for you. It sounded like you have Ingram around the first round.
Yeah, I recently just slid him to very the tippy top of my second round, and again, that could change as I dive into more players. I'm with Maxwell. I think that the rim pressure too, right? Like, as good as a ball handler and passers Ingram is, he doesn't have the athleticism really to apply too much pressure on the other team, where Sohan, that's kind of like a sneaky part of his whole thing, right? Is that you look at him and he's like, okay, we know that we're getting a good shooter. He's very scalable and might have a tiny little bit of a bag on the offensive end, as well as kind of like a mid post creator type player, right? So that's kind of the difference that I see with those two guys as well.
Well, another kind of forward who's at least I think is really scalable, can do a lot of everything, and has done it on a much more consistent basis this year, is Jake LaRavia from Wake Forest, 6'8", 235 pounds, averaged 15.1 points, 6.6 rebounds, 3.1 assists, 56.8% from the floor, 40% from 3, and 77% from the line. Stephen, with LaRavia, is he legitimately one of these kind of do-it-all forwards in the NBA, or is he just going to be one of these guys who is an awesome college player?
It's tricky. I want to first off say I don't think that he's going to be a do-it-all NBA level forward, but what I think that he does in college, he does have a couple of tools that will translate very well to the next level. So if I'm allowed to cheat, not necessarily answer your question, I'm going to do that. I think that he's a really good college player, that the best parts of his game do translate well to the NBA. I did some clips of Jake LaRavia for the tournament for No Ceilings, and one of the things I really wanted to emphasize was his improvements as a defender as the season has gone on. You go back and you watch the film against Duke, Paolo Banchero and Trevor Keels did not want to shoot over Jake LaRavia. Not to mention the fact that he is an efficient scorer from pretty much every level on the floor. He's a good rebounder, and he's a pretty darn good decision maker as a passer. The fact that one automatic first round guy, another guy who's got his first round stock in question, but I would take him in the first, and Trevor Keels, neither one of those dudes wanted anything to do with Jake LaRavia on the second end. So if you're telling me that I can draft a guy potentially late first to mid second, somewhere in that window, I think is where most folks would have him. if you get a guy who you can knock down threes, who's a smart player, who can also defend at a decent level, and is about 6'8", 6'9", like what's not to love, you know?
Maxwell, when you watch LaRavia's film, what gets you excited about his game?
Yeah, it's the offensive feel, the shooting, and the defense. And the defense is kind of just like an understated thing, and I don't know why that is. He's exceptional with getting into passing lanes, and on the ball, he just does a really nice job. He's not a blow-away athlete, but his footwork is very sound. He's very proficient. He does a phenomenal job of contesting without really getting into foul trouble. He's just very, very smooth on that side of the ball. I like what he does there a lot. Offensively, I think the shot is real. He doesn't take a ton of threes per game, and he has had a big percentage jump. I buy it. I think it looks really good. My one kind of hang up with him. So I have him early second, which I think is higher than a lot of people do. When guys pull out, he might slip into the first for me potentially. My one area of concern for him is he is a really good passer. And I love passing. I think if you look at the last several NBA championship teams, you don't really find guys that played major minutes that are below average passers for their position. I think it's a just critical skill to contribute to winning basketball. I like him as a passer, but a lot of the passing he does is sort of out of these face up, back down kind of scenarios where he's putting it on the floor a little bit. He's taking his time. I don't know that he can't do it, but I wish we got to see more like 0.5 style decision-making from him. If like he got the ball, he moved it to the right place really quickly. So that's kind of like my one little hang up with him. But I'm comfortable buying it based on the fact that we have seen the rest of his passing arsenal. So the passing, the shooting, the defense, those are all the things I look for in a role player in the modern NBA.
Stephen, do you have any hangups or hesitations with LaRavia, or is the guy that we're kind of seeing pretty much who you think he'll be?
I'm worried about him creating at the next level if he's asked to, right? Because we've talked about this, before Metcalf, Maxwell, we talked about it on our show too, it's not good enough just to be a 3-and-D guy. You got to be able to be trusted to make the right decision. I don't know if he's going to be one of these guys where he's only asked to, dribble pass or dribble shoot on a very aggressive closeout, because if he gets spooked, on an aggressive closeout and turns the ball over, there you go, and if he doesn't defend at a solid level, if he's going to be one of these guys in the second round, late, even maybe late first, depending on the team that he's on, you can't get played off the floor defensively as a wing. He's got the size, he's got the weight, he's got the, what it takes upstairs. I'm just worried about athletically how it translates at the next level and really what position he'll play. Is he going to be just kind of a run off screens 2? Is he going to be a toolsy kind of 2-3-4 type guy? I think that teams can really get creative with him. I'm worried about him going to a team that's not necessarily known for doing that and putting him in a role where he's asked to maybe do a little bit more than I would, which is, again, a kind of a 3-and-D guy is really what I would have LaRavia as, because his athleticism probably isn't like above average for his position either.
Well, someone who I don't think is going to have any trouble creating offense is his teammate, Alondes Williams, 6'5", 210-pound point guard who saw just an absurd statistical leap this year after transferring from Oklahoma to Wake Forest. On the year, he averaged 19.2 points, 6.5 rebounds, 5.2 assists, 1.2 steals, but 3.7 turnovers, which is a little concerning. But I think Williams is kind of the only guy in this draft class who could rival Armstrong in terms of playmaking. So, Maxwell, what gets you excited about Williams translating to the NBA?
The fact that he is able to get into the paint at will, beyond anything else. We know that paint touches are a very valuable thing. And he's really good at generating them. He's strong. He's got good footwork. He knows how to put it on the floor, and he's a real threat to pass, and he can really freeze defenses. The percentage of shots he takes at the rim is absurd. That more than anything else. I think the passing, I go up and down with the passing because I think he he can get, like you mentioned, the turnovers. He can get a little bit out of control at times. I do think a portion of that, at the very least, is the fact that Wake Forest lacks a lot of other offensive creation. And the fact that he does kind of need to force it out of necessity at times, that maybe he just tries to do too much because of that role. The tricky thing for him is just his off the catch shooting numbers are bad. He's not a good shooter from the outside. And if he struggles to get into the paint at will in the NBA, or if he's on a team where his role is not to have the ball in his hands, it's going to get really tricky. And I even went back and looked at his off the catch numbers at Oklahoma, and they were pretty poor there too. So if he isn't in a role where he's on the ball, it's going to get dicey pretty fast.
His shot diet is something I want to talk about, because you mentioned the paint touches, and 41.7% of his shots come around the basket and not post-ups, and he's in the 91st percentile. That's an absurd number, especially for a point guard. But of his jump shots, 67.5% of them are three-pointers, and he's in the 28th percentile of that. So given the disparity in that, against NBA-level defenders, against NBA-level athletes, Stephen, do you think he can still experience that same success attacking the rim, or are NBA defenses just going to be like, go ahead, shoot it, I don't care, I'm going to give you this massive cushion, I'm not letting you get to the rim, and if you punish me from three once a month, so be it?
I think kind of the latter there, Tyler. I think that one, it's again, I'll keep saying it because I really mean it. It's really hard for a rookie to come in and just be like, all right, we're going to run the offense through you, Alondes Williams, right? So, and you have to earn your minutes with your coach, and they're not going to be as forgiving as your college coaches, right? So, I mean, Wake Forest is a team of transplants pretty much. Like a lot of their guys are transfers, and they had to make best with what they had. I think that, Maxwell spoke to the decision making. Sometimes it is because there's not really a lot around him, but I've definitely seen him like acknowledge that there's a guy on the low post who's open and has a pretty good chance of finishing, and saying, no, I want to throw it completely across the floor to another guy, and it get picked off. But I've also seen him make that same read, and it looks so freaking beautiful, right? So maybe there's a coach out there that says, I want him on the team because I can get the bad habits, run out, and if he can develop a shot, we got an offensive threat. Defensively, I don't know. Like I think that he's okay. It's nothing necessarily to write home about. I don't think that he's a net negative. He won't be the worst defender in the NBA, I don't think, or anything like that. But the inefficiency on the shot, that's a real thing. But it's also really hard to look at a guy who can get to the basket at will at any level and be like, there's nothing that we can do for you. You know what I mean? Like there's got to be something that a team can use with him.
And projecting his shot is really difficult because a really strong indicator is typically free throw percentage. And over the last 3 seasons, it's gone from 63.5% to 84% and then down to 70.5%. And the 70% is on the highest volume. So, that makes me think it's closer to that. And then on the runner, he's in the 61st percentile, but doesn't take a ton of them because he always just gets to the rim. So that combined with the fact that he's never shot over 30% in the last 3 seasons from three makes it really tough for me to be like, he'll develop a shot. And, we always say that about so many players that, if they only develop a shot, they'll be great. It's like, well, it's kind of hard to do. It takes a lot of time and you have to be given the opportunity to do that. So Maxwell, if he can't do that, I'm not trying to bag on the guy, but what is he in the NBA?
I don't know. That's a good question, because he might again, like he might not be in the NBA if he can't get that sorted out. I will say though, the one thing I am open to with him is that normally if a guy was like this deep into his college career and this is what their shooting looked like, I'd be pretty willing to write them off. But just the overall leap in production that we've seen from him this year kind of makes me think like maybe he's just a late bloomer. Like maybe this is just going to come around and he's just putting it all together and coming into his coordination later on in life, because like that happens with some people. So because of that, like I'm still kind of open to it. And it's not to the same degree as like with Keegan Murray, where like Keegan Murray is just doing like all the stuff he didn't do before as soon as he got a bigger role, and like has clearly just taken his game to another level. I think there's maybe a bit of that with Alondes, where like I'm not totally sold on him not eventually being like an okay 3-point shooter. Because I think even if a guy like that, I think one thing that we overstate a lot of the times just as a basketball community is like, this guy's got to hit 36% from 3. Yeah. A lot of times that number is like lower than you think. Like a guy like Kyle Kuzma is fantastic this year, and like his 3-point percentage is way below league average. Like not everybody needs to shoot, as crazy as it sounds. I think even if he's like a slightly below average 3-point shooter, he can be okay. And I think that's possible just based on this late growth.
I think pointing out his late growth is really important. And, I talked about the 3-point percentage, but that kind of is a little skewed because last season he only shot one three a game and hit 16% of them. This year is 4.2 attempts per game, and that jumped to 29%. So that leap in production, it's there. And like you said, being a 36% 3-point shooter is really good. Like that's still really good and really valuable. If he can just get to 34% and then just make his defender hesitate for a second and just think like, wait, do I need to close out on him? Do I not? And then in that split second, I think that's where Alondes can kind of find those lanes to attack the rim or find a teammate because of his passing vision, despite the inconsistency with his decision making. But
could we potentially see like a modern day similar to like an Andre Miller with him? Because Andre Miller wasn't necessarily like the best shooter either, but good size for his position, good strength for his position. Obviously a fantastic playmaker. I think that he was much more judicious with his decision making, as a player, but kind of similar to that. Could we see a potential, Alondes, Williams being the next point guard to take people to the post and hurt the other team's point guard in the paint and set his other teammates up?
I don't hate that. But like you mentioned, it's the decision making and the consistency with that. Maybe if he's put in a lesser role and given, clear instructions of basically how they want him to play and to be used, then maybe that decision making really improves because he's not the focal point. He's not the guy who has to generate everything for that offense. And, I'm really glad that you pointed out the post up stuff. I know guards don't go to the post a lot, but it is a legit skill. And with his size, his physicality, he's in the 89th percentile in scoring down there. So it's a legit tool. And then he also has the ability to kind of create from that post for other people, for cutters and shooters. So I think Miller's an interesting and not too far off comp. Maxwell, where are you at with that?
I could see it. I think like mentioning the post-ups too, something I've been thinking about a lot recently is with teams having more shooting at unconventional positions, like is being a guard who can post up going to become like an undervalued micro skill of sorts? Like if you can have everybody else spread the floor, like is it going to be valuable? And like Villanova does a ton of it this year with like their guards posting up. Like, could that be something we start to see NBA teams do? Like it wouldn't shock me. Like we saw a lot of it in the mid 2000s with guys like Dwayne Wade. I think Andre Miller would be like an idealized situation. And obviously, like you said, it's not, much more judicious with his decision making was Miller. I really think he needs to reel it in, and I think a lot of it's going to come down to developmental opportunity and team fit. And it's still kind of tricky to find that team fit because it's going to need to be a team that is okay handing him the reins as a playmaker, but also has a lot of shooting. And it just doesn't feel like a lot of teams like that exist that would also like that have a ton of shooting and also need to turn the ball over to a rookie.
And we're not necessarily ageist, at no ceilings, right? But we understand, right, that NBA front offices typically are, and like how comfortable are those teams going to be with putting, what is he, like 23, I think, or
something like that.
He's close to, if not 23. So our team's going to be like, yeah, let's invest in a 23-year-old developmental guy whose best role might be a little unconventional, at this level. Like that might be where teams have a little bit of issue with taking him.
Absolutely. Well, fellas, thank you so much for the time. Thank you for joining me. This was a lot of fun. Thrilled to have you guys on board. But as we end every episode, Stephen, what's the best thing in the basketball world you saw recently?
I'm going to cheat and be a little cheesy and just say being a part of No Ceilings, man. Like this past week has been a whirlwind. I read Maxwell's piece, kind of bidding his, Substack community farewell. It was awesome just reading that and just knowing Maxwell the way I do, just like being able to read the joy, right? Like it was pretty phenomenal. But if I have to stick to like a pure basketball take, like Jason Tatum going nuts against Brooklyn was freaking fantastic. I've been a big Jason Tatum guy for a while now, so him just going nuts against the Nets was awesome.
Maxwell, how about you?
Yeah, I'm gonna say the Furman versus Chattanooga game. Just real sicko behavior, trying to get some Jalen Slauson film on. It was unreal. So at the end of the game, Chattanooga's like fourth best player just like I think Furman either took the lead. Yeah, I think they took the lead by a little bit. And Chattanooga's like fourth best player just dribbled the ball up the court and launched a three with like four hands in his face and made it to send him to the tournament. And this is March, baby. Like it's that, like for me, it was like, all right, it's tournament time. I'm watching Chattanooga. Like this is what March is all about. It just got me fired up for the tournament. So that was honestly the game more than anything else, was Furman versus Chattanooga.
And shout out to Max Chrissy at the half coming in for Michigan State, putting up 10 points in the opening. I hope that by the time that this show ends and I go back and look at it, he doesn't make me look like an idiot and like only scores 10 points, for the whole game. But it looked like he was having a good outing against Maryland in the opening half.
Well, Stephen, please plug away. Tell the people where they can find you, where they can support you.
Well, you can find me at No Ceilings now, which is awesome to say. At No Ceilings NBA on Twitter. You can find me personally on Twitter at Stephen G Hoops. You're also going to be able to find me very soon on the Draft Deeper podcast, where I will be the new co-host to Nathan Grubel. I'm excited about that. You can find the clips that I do for No Ceilings all over the No Ceilings account. And I have it in the works that some written work is going to be started to help expand, how much content folks are going to be getting from No Ceilings through different times of the week. So I'm really excited about that. So just stay tuned. No Ceiling. Excuse me. I'm sorry. I don't know this off the top of my head. Metcalf, can you plug the No Ceilings website?
NoCeilingsNBA.com. We're going to have a talk offline about that.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Not for showing.
Hey man, I'm excited. I'll chalk this up to jitters.
Maxwell, how can the people support you?
Yeah, I'm also all my work's going to be at NoCeilingsNBA.com going forward. Please subscribe to the No Ceilings Substack. You get really great work there every day. Like I honestly, even before I was here, was reading the No Ceilings work every day. It's phenomenal. And then my Twitter is at Baumboards. It's BAUM and then the word boards, like draft boards. Or boards for rebounding, because I'm a sucker for positional rebounding. So at Baumboards on Twitter is where you can find my draft stuff.
Well, once again, I am Tyler Metcalf. You can follow me on Twitter at TMetcalf11, and please make sure to subscribe to No Ceilings at NoCeilingsNBA.com, where you can find all of our written work for free. We put out something 5 days a week, I believe soon to be 6, so it's almost too much free content for you. It gets delivered directly to your inbox, so there's no excuse not to sign up. Please also make sure to follow us on Twitter at No Ceilings NBA and on YouTube at No Ceilings TV. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and 5-star rating. Until next time, see ya.